latest straight to your inbox.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dewbs & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight, let's just cut to the chase. I've got a question for you. Is it time to nationalise our steel industry? And the tariff talk still dominates the world, but when it comes to us, should we be using our online safety, the tax rates that online giants will pay, as bargaining chips? And get this, in some parts of the UK, there is a 100-year wait for family-sized social housing. What do you think to that? And London is no longer one of the top 5 wealthiest cities in the world, as millionaires have left en masse last year. How much of a problem do you think this is, and what do you think is causing it? Also, the rich and the famous and the powerful, we all know what super injunctions are, but when it comes to parliamentary privilege, i.e. people like MPs, being able to name people, should it still be a thing? All of that and lots more. Look at my panel tonight. I've reunited 2 of your favourites, Peter Hitchens, the columnist at the Daily Mail, and Aaron Bastani, the founder of Novara Media. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live and give you your 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story tonight at 6. A global trade showdown is escalating tonight as China and the EU have hit back hard against Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on foreign goods. Beijing has fired the latest shot, announcing a massive 84% tariff on US imports. That's after Donald Trump pushed duties on Chinese goods to 104%. Brussels is also striking back, with new EU tariffs on American products kicking in from the 15th of this month, and more waves coming in May and again in December. Markets are remaining rattled. London's FTSE 100 plunging to a 13-month low, with European stocks also sliding and Wall Street opening on edge. But Trump remains defiant, telling Americans to be cool and claiming countries hit by his tariffs are now calling up to make a deal. In other news, Sir Trevor Phillips has slammed the government's handling of grooming gang inquiries, saying it's utterly shameful, and accusing ministers of backing away from local probes for political reasons. The former chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission said plans had been watered down because of the demographic of people involved and the fact that towns affected are largely Labour-held. It comes after Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips has announced a new £5 million fund for flexible, locally led work, replacing the previously promised formal reviews. Well, the Conservatives' Kevin Hollinrake told us earlier it's just allowing a cover-up to continue.
Well, I was appalled to hear that yesterday. I was in the chamber for that statement. And, you know, I mean, this means that the cover-up can continue. We know that some of the people within the local authorities concerned were complicit. We want a national inquiry, an independent national inquiry, which can set its own terms of reference, which can call witnesses, call for evidence, and make sure anybody who should be held to account is held to account for what's happened, because what's happened is an utter disgrace.
But the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, says an inquiry is no longer needed.
We're absolutely determined to make sure that we give local areas the tools that they need to tackle the problems in their communities, and we will hold them to account for it. Of course we will, and the Minister, Jess Phillips, is absolutely determined to do so. But what we won't do is pretend that just announcing inquiries is the way to solve this problem. In some cases we need inquiries, in other cases we don't. We need other measures, and that's what we're working with communities to do.
The UK is in for a blast of sunshine with temperatures set to hit 24 degrees in London and the South East on Friday, making it possibly the hottest day of the year so far. But with the heat comes a serious warning. Fire crews say the risk of wildfires is extreme after weeks of dry weather and barely any rain. Blazes have already broken out across Northern Ireland and in Scotland, with crews there responding to dozens of wildfire calls just overnight. The London Fire Brigade, meanwhile, is urging people to ditch the barbecues, bin their rubbish and stub out cigarettes properly, especially in parks and open spaces. And the King has warned that peace is never to be taken for granted in a historic speech to Italy's Parliament today, marking the first time that a British monarch has addressed both Italian houses. A military band played the anthem as he entered the Chamber of Deputies, where hundreds of MPs gathered to hear him speak. His Majesty also reflected on the echoes of war across Europe and pledged to strengthen ties between the UK and Italy, saying the nations are deeply intertwined. The address, spoken partly in Italian and falling on his 20th wedding anniversary, drew some laughter as he joked about British takes on Italian cuisine and his own questionable language skills. That's the news on GB News. A full roundup from me at 7 o'clock. Now, though, it's over to Michelle.
Thank you very much for that. This is Dewbs & Co. I'm Michelle Dewberry with you until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, look at this. We've reunited them back by popular demand. I'm not just making this up, you know, you two. So many people get in touch and say, when will we see these two back together again on your programme? Well, you lucky things. The answer is now. I'm talking about Peter Hitchens, the columnist at the Daily Mail, and Aaron Bastani, the founder of Novara Media. I'm not making it up. They do. They get in touch and say, where are you two? Why aren't you on? When will you be back? So there you go. You can tell whether or not you still enjoy them by the end of the programme. We've got a lot we need to discuss today. Ladies and gents, you can join the conversation all the usual ways. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. Go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay. Of course, you can tweet or you can X me. Now, when it comes to British steel, or should I say what's left of it, and I mean, we can even get into that, and I'm sure we will in a second. Lots of people, you can tell it's election season, can't you? Because there's been a huge amount of conversation about this today. People desperate to get in the front foot, saying what they would do, of course, off the back of the likes of Scunthorpe now. This conversation, when it comes to steel, the fact that we've failed our steel industry in this country, Aaron, we've failed these workers. We therefore, by default, have now failed these whole regions. It's not just about the actual place that has the plants, it's the regions that extend beyond them. Scunthorpe now in the potential line of fire. Is it time to nationalise British steel?
100%. And, you know, some people might look at Nigel Farage being arguably opportunistic about this. In a way, I welcome it. I think if we can have a political consensus in this country that we need to nationalise what remains of Britain's once mighty steel industry, fantastic. I think Labour should be very worried. There was an image yesterday of Farage by one of the blast furnaces holding a trade union piece of literature. I think it was Unite or GMB. Labour should be very worried about that.
Are you in Scunthorpe, watching or listening at home? How do you feel right now? Are you in Wales, perhaps, or some of the other places where you've already had this happen to you? It must be so worrying because, of course, it's all very uncertain at the moment. There's this talk about renationalisation. There's this request for money because, of course, we know now that this is Chinese-owned. Peter Hitchens, what do you think should happen?
Well, I don't know, but I think that the idea that nationalisation by itself would solve anything is probably empty. Unless we actually decided that we were going to rebuild a proper steel-making industry on a large scale, then the fact that it was owned by the state wouldn't make much difference. The state has certainly been pretty feeble over the past several years about letting huge and important steel-making facilities close, whether at Redcar or in South Wales. And it's now reached a stage where we have two blast furnaces left. There are two reasons for this, and they've been current for a very long time. One has been the view in our political class that we didn't need manufacturing industry, that there are no such things as strategic industries. It doesn't matter. And this is shown to be foolish by recent revelations that new British warships are being built of French steel. Now, imagine if that were the case during wartime, if we were having to import steel from other countries, either which needed their own steel for their own war preparations or which were hostile to us. Where we'd be, we wouldn't have steel to build warships. It would be ludicrous. No serious power can do that. And then there's the global warming frenzy and the belief that by closing down industries such as the steel industry, closing down blast furnaces, which are the only primary way of making steel, that we will somehow save the planet. I don't think this is borne out by any facts. The huge amounts of steel are still manufactured in China and India, and no one cares about them because they can't stop them doing it anyway, and therefore any gestures we make, like those in closing down coal-fired power stations, don't have any impact on the planet if you believe that theory. So these two ideologically driven views, one that it doesn't matter if you have proper manufacturing industry, and the other that we have to suppress anything in favour of concern for the climate, have left us here. So nationalising would not actually change either of those things. It would just mean we'd have nationally owned ruins.
Let's just put some figures on this. So if we go back to about 1970s, 28 million tonnes of steel we was involved in the production of. Now, if you go back to 2024, it's 4 million. I mean, for me, this feels almost, Aaron Bastani, because we're now so dependent now on imports, particularly Chinese imports. It almost feels like an act of national self-harm on multiple different levels. Number one, because of the sheer lack of independence now, all the things we talk about when it comes to defence. Yeah. Number two, you've decimated these places, and I worry for Scunthorpe. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Scunthorpe. There's about 3,000 people at risk, potentially, the jobs there. And it's not just the workers in that plant. It's all the periphery, whether it's the cafes. And what happens, as I'm sure many people will be familiar with now, it's not just a random guy in one family that works at these plants. It will be, in many cases, it's been granddads, dads, it's the sons. The kids will be at school now, the teenagers will be getting ready to leave school. They had their minds set on getting a job in those plants. It's devastating, and those places don't recover after this.
100%.
Why have we done this to ourselves?
There's so much to talk about here. We don't have the time, sadly. I mean, look at a very similar industry, and I will come back to steel in a moment, automotive manufacture. We produce, I think, now less than 1 million cars a year, about 900,000 cars a year. As recently as 2015, that figure was 2 million. So I think that really demonstrates how quickly things are changing and how badly they are now getting. It's a similar story with steel, as you touched upon a moment ago. In the 19th century, Sheffield, one city, produced 80% of the world's steel. Mr. Henry Bessemer invented modern steel production techniques, someone from this country, and yet this is happening. Quickly responding to Peter, he said, why would you nationalise it? Because if we don't nationalise it, it will literally close. That's the point.
That's all very well, but if you do nationalise it, will that mean it won't close?
It's not sufficient. No, well, that would be the point.
But let me just ask you this, because you say if we don't nationalise it, what will happen? The Chinese owners of this, they reckon that they're losing £700,000 a day. So are you saying, if their maths are to be believed, are you saying that the taxpayers right up and down the land should absorb that £700,000 loss daily?
What we need, and it goes back to Peter's point about defence, for instance, we spend £60 billion a year on defence in this country. That's before the increases that were recently touted by Sir Keir Starmer. There's no point having F-35s and Trident and all the latest gizmos and gadgets and drones if you don't have domestic steel manufacture, because in a war, you are literally defenceless. Now, I'm not as hawkish as some people out there, but that is geopolitics 101. You need energy, you need steel, you need people to defend yourself. So I think it's just absolute, bare, essential common sense to have some kind of blast furnace steel manufacturing capability in this country. This is literally the last one. We're not talking about an enormous industry like British Leyland in the 70s and 80s. If you nationalise it, huge costs, huge numbers of workers involved. It's a very small, sadly, industry that remains. So I don't really see any counter-argument there. Deindustrialisation as well, like you say, has huge social implications.
Massive.
And we can't afford those as a country anymore. We cannot afford those as a country. Thousands of breadwinners, not just losing their income, those families hit, the peripheral economy hit, like you say. Psychologically, mentally, those people have been broken time after time, and this time it cannot be allowed to happen.
Well, it can't be allowed to happen, but it seems quite likely that it will happen. And what actual levers do you, or would you, if you were in government, have to stop it? We've got to this stage because of a long-pursued policy, a belief that we did not in this country need to have manufacturing industry, that men didn't need to have jobs, that it was perfectly all right to deindustrialise a large part of England, and we would then survive through service industries. That's been the belief of governments and economists and of fashionable opinion now for at least 40 years, and we followed that. If you reverse it now, how long is it going to take us, and under what circumstances, to rebuild serious industries like steel from 2 blast furnaces in Scunthorpe to something remotely resembling a national steel industry? I don't see it being that easy, and large sacrifices might need to be made to obtain it. It's all very well saying nationalise it. I'm not, in my nature, against nationalisation on principle or for it on principle. I'm pragmatic about it. Would it be any use? I'm not sure that. I think you know that as a decision, it wouldn't really change very much. That's all.
But let's just assume then. Let's just fast forward and let's not worry about the details. But let's just assume it's renationalised, right? So now we've got this loss-making steel producer on the British taxpayers' books. Yeah. What would you then suggest? Would you then suggest that developers, infrastructure projects, etc., they are compelled to use British steel? Because it's not you can produce whatever you want, but if people don't want to buy that because it's not the most cost-effective product, what would you do? Would you suggest that we've got to compel those purchasing people, or what?
So £700,000 a day is the claim. I mean, of course, that has to be questioned, and there are incentives to say and dramatise the losses because they probably want to close it down. And they probably want to write off various liabilities for tax, etc.
But don't worry about the money. Let's imagine it's nationalised.
Let's say it's tens of millions a year.
Steel.
Yeah. Let's say it's tens of millions of pounds a year, and of course that should not be taken lightly. First of all, I think that's worth it for the defence concerns we just said. Secondly, British rail, as in the literal rail infrastructure that we use for our trains, draws very heavily on this particular location, this site. I'm in favour of building high-speed rail in many places, including to Manchester, from Manchester to Leeds to Bradford, etc. I would use exclusively British-made steel. Now, how would you do that? I would probably start with something like a tariff. It would not be Trumpian. And this is my big worry, by the way.
What do you mean, tariff? What are you on about?
Very low tariffs on, for instance, Japanese and Chinese steel. Very, very low.
Right.
Very low. Not Trumpian. I'm talking 5%. That generates a little bit of revenue and it creates a little bit of equilibrium. That's all. And I think that's the world we're now in. We're no longer in the EU. We can do that. Let's see if it works, by the way.
I mean, what is the price differential between Chinese steel and British steel? Because I imagine there's quite a lot of difference here.
Infinitely cheaper, but you're going to generate maybe enough revenue to pay for the losses we're talking about with this particular foundry, which I think is necessary purely from a national interest point of view.
Richard's got in touch and said, Michelle, I am Scunthorpe born and bred. My dad worked there for 40 years. He says, basically, he sounds furious, but what he's saying is that the Chinese company should never have been able to take control of such a key thing as British steel. He's very angry about that, it sounds. And Philip says, of course it would be time to nationalise steel, Michelle, but not only steel, all essential utilities. It's wrong that they were ever put up for grabs, he says. Let's not get on to things like water. Many of you will have very strong opinions on that as well. Tell me your thoughts. Lots that we need to discuss, not least tariffs. I want to talk to you about social housing, millionaires and parliamentary privilege. I'll see you in 2.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel. This is a Stingray torpedo in the hangar of HMS Duncan, an air defence destroyer. It's recently returned from operations in the Eastern Mediterranean. But today, on this Royal Navy vessel, it's not about war fighting, but it's about commemoration as we march towards 80 years since VE Day. So HMS Duncan has been hosting a street party on the deck here in Portsmouth. Earlier, we spoke to Commander Dan Lee about why he thought this was such an important occasion for the country.
So VE Day was a culmination of the end of, or the beginning of the end of World War II. It was a time that was a truly national endeavour, whether that be people digging for victory, people in new roles in fields and factories, people supporting at home, children evacuated, and it was such a huge national event. It is something that we should really celebrate, that it was coming to an end. With that, with the number of veterans who are sadly reducing in numbers, today's a real opportunity. We're really happy to have a number of the local school children and Royal Navy cadets here, so we can tell the story of World War II, why it was important, and what we fought for.
And earlier we spoke with Ross Kemp, who's been a key part of promoting the VE Day commemoration, about how the entirety of the United Kingdom should come together on the 5th of May on that bank holiday weekend to celebrate our fallen heroes.
It's very easy to forget that the freedoms that we enjoy in this country came at a price. And the veterans that are still alive, they won't be alive, sadly, in 10 years' time. So 80 is a big benchmark. And I think we should let them know that we appreciate the sacrifices that they and their colleagues made for us to enjoy the freedoms that we have.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. I've got Aaron Bastani and Peter Hitchens alongside me. So many of you have got in touch about whether or not we should nationalise British Steel. Of course, we're talking off the back of the Scunthorpe situation. Mike says, Michelle, nationalised anything is a bad idea. Well, actually, it being privatised doesn't seem to have worked very well either, though, Mike, would be the flip side of that. Ed says, this is all on Miliband. He's killed the steel industry. To flourish, it needs so much, copious amounts of coal and electricity, he says. You're laying the blame very squarely there with him. Public ownership should be compulsory for industry where no local competition is possible, says Angie. She's thinking steel, water, gas, coal, so on and so forth. Diane says, Michelle, you've got to think about the supply chain. Even local food producers will lose out if this Scunthorpe plant goes down, because there will be no canteen, nothing, she says. It will be devastating. I know it will. It actually, it actually gives me goosebumps, because I don't think sometimes that the politicians, when they all sit and everyone's pontificating about everything, I'm not sure that people truly understand the generational impact, how many people within the same family will rely on this and have relied on this for so many years. Those people, I just wonder how you sleep at night, if you manage at all. Get in touch if you're one of them. But look, something that makes your head spin. You can almost, if you blink, goodness only knows what's happened next when it comes to the crazy world of Donald Trump, particularly when it comes to tariffs. We saw, didn't we, yesterday, the press conference, Caroline Levitt, the press secretary. Let's remind ourselves what she was saying last night.
Countries like China, who have chosen to retaliate and try to double down on their mistreatment of American workers, are making a mistake. President Trump has a spine of steel.
Yeah, he seems to have. So she's talking about China there. I mean, this has just escalated significantly since we all talked last night, everybody, because now you've got 104% tariffs from the US to China. China have hit back with 84% tariffs. So this is all getting off the Richter scale now. Here in this country, I'm not sure how much contact Starmer's had with Trump, if any, since this has all been escalating, but there's lots of conversations about whether or not our online safety should be a bargaining tool, whether or not things like the digital services tax on the big tech companies should be a bargaining chip. What do you think to it all, Aaron Bastani?
Online safety is really interesting, because the people leading the charge in the United States around online safety, particularly for children, are Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
It's in Republican states where you've got governors, etc. In fact, it started in Florida, where they're saying we have a major problem with children having access to smartphones in schools. So this is one of those rare things where it's not an issue that it's either red or blue in the US, Democrat or Republican. And I think that's the major problem for the big tech firms. Isn't necessarily a national interest argument in the context of tariffs, although we can talk about it here.
Well, hold on, because this is how ludicrous and insane it all is, because I've just said to you, if you blink, goodness only knows what's happened. In the time that Aaron Bastani's been talking, things have changed again, because now Trump says he's now raising Chinese tariffs to 125%. It was 104, you will remember, when I was just explaining to you a few minutes ago. Anyway, sorry, Aaron. That's how fast-moving and pretty insane all of this is. And it's dangerous. This is not something that's not going to affect people.
Yeah, well, this is really key. So the United States is, by nominal GDP, the world's largest economy. It's putting tariffs of 125% on the world's second largest economy. The world's second largest economy is putting tariffs of 84% on the world's largest economy. That's clearly going to mean massive problems for global trade. The rest of us are going to be caught in the middle. In terms of big tech, though, I think actually we do have a tremendous amount of leverage because domestic constituencies in the US have big problems with the likes of Meta and Alphabet and, you know, all the platforms, of course, that are parts of those groups, Facebook, Instagram, and so on. And I think we have to take the bull by the horns here, particularly amongst under-20s. Anybody with kids, anybody with young people in their families know how destructive these technologies are for young people. And I think it's just it's a slam dunk. We have to do it. And like I said, just as in the US, it's not a Democrat-Republican thing. In this country, it's not a Tory-Labour thing. It's not a left-right thing. We need to keep our kids safe, and this is a really, really important way of doing it.
Peter?
Well, I don't really want to get into online safety. The only online safety seems to me to rest in not letting children anywhere near these devices at all. But on the extraordinary tariff war, which has now exploded, I think that people must begin to think. An awful lot of people have made allowances for Donald Trump, particularly if he does things that they think they like. And I think the moment is surely coming when anybody interested in rational politics limited to the true possibilities of what will actually work should begin to wonder whether the person now occupying the Oval Office is fit to do so. It's just immensely worrying if he's doing this and has the power to do it, and there's no break on this, where it might end. It doesnn't seem to these actions don't seem to me to be the work of a wholly rational or responsible person anymore. And those who have, particularly Conservatives, made excuses for Donald Trump because sometimes he does things that they like, should stop doing so, in my view now.
Well, just to be clear, because goodness knows where this will end. I told you when we introduced this topic, it was a 104% tariff. I told you a second ago it's escalated to 125. Beijing basically published a white paper, and I just want to draw your attention to this line. They basically said the Chinese people's legitimate right to development is inalienable. What they then went on to say is that they will fight until the end, warning that the US will reap what it sows. Also, though, I mean, this is Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump has now posted, and you know what it's like, it goes on and on. So I'm not going to read the entire thing, so I'll still be sitting here into the next programme. But he's writing on that China has essentially shown a lack of respect to the world's markets. And this is why he's raising this tariff. He says it's effective immediately. He's hoping, he says, that China will soon realise that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. He goes on saying that more than 75 countries are basically trying to negotiate better relations with the US right now. And he thinks that actually China should perhaps be doing the same. He's going on that he hasn't retaliated in any way, shape or form, and that other countries haven't retaliated against him. And he has authorised a 90-day pause and also lowered his tariff rate during this period of 10%, which is also effective immediately. So long story short, in case you're not following all that, because it makes your head hurt, doesn't it? He reckons that China is not playing the game, so up the tariffs go there. For the other countries that he reckons are playing the game, he'll give them a pause and he'll look to do a bit of business. That's the short version. What do you think to it all? Goodness gracious me. Did you want to come back in or not?
Yeah, quickly. I mean, there's been a big sell-off of 30-year US Treasuries today, which means that people aren't very confident in the future prospects of the US.
Well, there you go. What do you think to it all? Look, I'll tell you what people are also not very confident of, getting their hands on social housing that's family-sized. Over a 100-year wait in some parts of the UK. Let's look at that after the break.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Heavy showers and thunderstorms impacting Portugal and southwestern parts of Spain, but elsewhere across Europe we are going to see improving temperatures through the week. Initially some heavy showers affecting Tenerife and Madeira, eventually moving into parts of Portugal and Spain, but as we head our way further east, largely settled, lots of sunny spells and improving temperatures too, starting off in the mid-teens but increasing through the course of the week. And there'll be plenty of sunshine as we head into next week, the odd shower still affecting Tenerife, and that's where we'll see the best of the temperatures too.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
The latest GB News Travel.
Good evening, I'm Nick Arkell. The M1 southbound is still closed by accident investigation work, junction 5 through to junction 1, with congestion stretching back onto the M25. The M66 is now blocked by a police incident, junction 1 through to the end of the motorway, really busy, congestion stretching back onto the M60. The M18 northbound's queuing with emergency repairs, junction 2, one lane is closed there, and it's heavy on the M4 eastbound with a collision, junction 5 through to 4B on the London bound side. The M55 westbound into Blackpool, heavy with a vehicle fire near to junction 2 with one lane closed.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dewbs & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co with you until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Peter Hitchens, the columnist at the Daily Mail, and Aaron Bastani, the founder of Novara Media. Just before the break, we were bringing you... Well, we're actually just having a nice casual conversation about tariffs, as you do. But, of course, as you also do if you're Donald Trump, you change everything during the course of that conversation. So, as we just broke the news to you then, tariffs when it comes to China and the USA all getting a little bit out of hand now. We started the conversation with 104% tariffs from the US over to China. During our conversation, that was just massively increased to 125%. But also, in the same breath, what Donald Trump has also effectively said is that he appreciates and respects the fact that many other countries have basically played ball with him. So he's actually going to have a 90-day pause on the other countries, and he's going to have a retaliatory rate of 10% now during that period. I've got to tell you as well, the Dow Jones apparently has just popped up. You can see it there on your screen as we speak. Off the back of that announcement, if you don't know what you're looking at, long story short, just look at that green spike that goes up. So actually people seem to be responding and reacting quite well to that announcement. But of course, that is only one of many metrics that people will be following quite closely. What do you think to it all? It hurts your head trying to keep up with it, doesn't it? I can categorically tell you that. Anyway, look, something else that'll hurt your head if you are waiting for social housing that's family-sized. Get this, ladies and gents, in some parts of the UK now, the wait is over 100 years. There's so much I could carry on talking about, but let's just cut to the chase. How much of a problem is this, do you think, Aaron Bastani? And what do you think the remedy is?
Well, it depends where you live. So if you live in Sunderland, I saw that the wait is just over a year. The lucky Mackhams, and inner city, London, Manchester, some other rural constituencies too, really, really long time to wait. One thing that really surprised me, because of course in a way, high population density places like Tower Hamlets or parts of Greater Manchester, not that surprising. Places like Cornwall, Devon, 20-year waits, the best part of a 20-year wait in actually some of the least densely populated parts of the country. So I think you cannot put that down to immigration, growing population rates, etc. So people might say that for some parts of the country, but I think we have a national problem overall with regards to a lack of house building. The question is how do you do it? Because the market hasn't been the solution there for stuff like this for 35, 40 years.
Peter?
Well, here there really is a case for renationalisation. That is to say, we should take back into public ownership the houses which were foolishly sold, which were social housing called council housing. Very, very large numbers of good quality houses with gardens for family occupation, which were available at reasonable rents for people who were at work, and which allowed people to move from place to place in a way that they can't now, and which kept, as I say, it possible for people who were earning modest incomes to live decently in decent surroundings. Get them back into public ownership and start renting them out and stop selling them off. And it would be not immensely expensive, but then so, as I constantly point out, is the alternative which we've developed, housing benefit, which, as far as I can see, benefits nobody and costs more than the Royal Air Force and each year. And over time, once we'd re-established social housing in all our major cities, then many of our problems would go. And it wouldn't be a frenzy of building, it would be perhaps a frenzy of buying and repurposing. But I think that in the end, the country would be far better off. It would be worth the spending of money. So much public money is spent to no effect. In this case, you could spend money to great effect and completely transform the situation.
But how would that work practically then? So if some person's sitting in the house now, what?
The simplest way of working it is that you buy the house back. The people who are there have then got the price of the house to go off on the private market to buy, if that's what they wish to do. And as soon as you buy the house back, and there's an offer to do this at generous terms, then the house goes back into the social housing market. Take quite some time and cost a lot of money, as I don't doubt. But the end result of it would be the recreation of those very successful things, the council housing estates, which I think a lot of people who know anything much about housing greatly regret the departure of. I think they should be brought back. You're not going to be able to build them again, so buy them back.
We had a guest on here the other day, I can't remember who it was now, one of my panellists, and he was proposing an idea, and it really got quite a reaction from a lot of the viewers. What he was saying, so when we look at this chart that we're all talking about, the study today, The longest wait is in Westminster. So that is 107 years, basically, you're waiting for a family house, social housing in Westminster. Now, for those of you that don't know, Westminster is one of the most expensive boroughs in this country when it comes to purchasing houses. Most normal people, even actually most people with relatively well-paid jobs, wouldn't be able to afford a family-sized home in Westminster. And one of my panellists was suggesting that actually you shouldn't have any social housing in places like Zone 1, because if you couldn't afford to buy or to rent or live there as a working person, and I can hear people shouting, hang on a minute, I'm in social housing and I work, so, I hear you. Why should you then be able to live in the most expensive place in central London?
Well, that wouldn't be necessarily my priority. I would do what Peter's talking about, as in giving a certain budget to local authorities to buy up property. But I also think in terms of new builds, there's not many brownfield sites in Westminster. You can't compare brownfield sites in Westminster to somewhere like where I live in Portsmouth, right in the middle of the city. You have huge amounts of brownfield sites. You could easily build enough for 30, 40,000 people, very easily, much harder in Westminster, and the market value of those places is much higher. So there's a twin-track approach. I can see the point being made there, although, of course, I would defend the right to social housing anywhere, including Zone 1.
I'll tell you a house that no one's ever going to be able to afford to live in 100 years, the White House. Caroline Levitt, Press Secretary on her feet speaking. Let's go.
5, due to their insistence on escalation.
Ed, go ahead. Secretary, thank you for doing this. Let me ask you 3 quick things, if I could, just for the sake of clarity, because the markets are open and they're wondering. First of all, Mexico and China, are they part of this 10% universal?
Well, China, no, China.
Mexico and Canada, are they part of the 10%?
Yes.
Okay. Second, given then that you have the rest of the world essentially calling it, it's not China, is this now just all about China?
Well, it's about bad actors, and what we will see is some of the very early countries are China's neighbors. We're going to see. I'm seeing Vietnam today. Japan's at the front of the queue. South Korea, India. So we will see. And as I've repeatedly said, and President Trump has been saying it for years, China is the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world, and they are the biggest source of the U.S. trade problems. And indeed, they are problems for the rest of the world, because what we've seen is that as the U.S. announced a tariff wall last week, many of those goods have already started flooding into Europe.
So as you see it now, this trade war is China versus the rest of the world?
Well, I'm not calling it a trade war, but I am saying that China has escalated, and President Trump responded very courageously to that, and we are going to work on a solution with our trading partners.
If I could just, excuse me, Raquel, if I could just add to what the Secretary said. Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here. You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China, when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America, not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need this president in the Oval Office to talk to them. And that's exactly why more than 75 countries have called, because the United States of America is the best place in the world to do business. And as the president has shown great courage, as the secretary has said, in choosing to retaliate against China even higher. Elena, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Treasury Secretary Bessent. Can you explain more of the decision making on what feels like a reversal here? I mean, just these went into effect less than 15 hours ago, these tariffs. Why the pause now? What led to that?
No, again, President Trump created maximum negotiating leverage for himself, and which tariffs went into effect 15 hours ago? The ones that we have lowered went into effect a week ago. They were announced a week ago, and we have just been overwhelmed by the response from mostly our allies who want to come and negotiate in good faith. So we are expecting them to come with their best deal. As I said a week ago today, don't retaliate, hold your ground, let's see what happens. And China, they kept escalating and escalating, and now they have 125% tariffs that will be effective immediately.
Mr. Secretary,
go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for doing this. The 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs, is that that because of the whiplash that we've been seeing across the financial markets? How much was, what we saw in the stock markets, a part of this decision?
No, it's because it's going to, because of the large number of inbounds, we've had more than 75 countries contact us, and I imagine after today there will be more. So it is just a processing problem. Each one of these solutions is going to be bespoke. It is going to take some time, and President Trump wants to be personally involved. So that's why we're getting the 90-day pause.
Mr. Secretary, there was a tweet that you and Secretary Lutnick were in the Oval Office with the President talking about this. Can you talk about what that conversation was like and what you guys said to one another that led to this decision?
Look, it's all the President's decision, and the President had a level in mind to raise the China tariffs, and then he had the essentially the 3-month pause in mind, and we were discussing the exact wording. Sorry? Of course.
It's the President's decision.
It's the President's decision. It was the President's decision to wait until today. And again, as I've said in the past, no one creates leverage for himself like President Trump.
Mr. Secretary.
Shelby, go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, what does the President want to see by this, I think it's July 9th deadline to keep things paused? Is it just trade barriers coming down, or is it more than that?
These are trade negotiations, but if countries want to come and offer other things, I talked about yesterday that we are thinking about a big LNG project in Alaska that South Korea, Japan, Taiwan are interested in financing and taking a substantial portion of the offtake. But again, in essence, that is trade because it will decrease the trade deficit that we have with those countries. So everything's on the table.
Mr. President.
Secretary, a clarification on the pause. What happened to those countries who just had 10% baseline tariffs, like Brazil and others? Are they still going to have this 90-day pause? Because you were saying that there will be a tariff of 10% for others. So what happened to those who just had a 10%?
Yeah, that's going to remain.
And do you call this an embargo to China?
Pardon?
You call this an embargo to China, a trade embargo?
I'm not sure what you mean by the word embargo.
125% tariffs, like those, and then impose 84%. Isn't this an embargo?
Well, it's not. It's China's decision that we have the deficit with them. They sell us almost 5 times what we sell them. So again, I think it's an own goal by China.
Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Secretary, with this, does this signal that you're confident that you're going to be able to strike a satisfactory deal with all these 75 nations that approach you?
It signals that President Trump cares about trade and that we want to negotiate in good faith. And as I said, each one of these is going to be a separate, bespoke negotiation. So we are confident that, having seen the other side of where this could go, and it was like I said last week, the market didn't understand. Those were maximum levels. The countries can think about those levels as they come to us to bring down their tariffs, their non-tariff trade barriers. We're going to discuss currency manipulation, subsidy of labor, and industry.
Secretary, as far as you, will the pause also apply to the sectoral tariffs that the President has announced, pharma, lumber, anything else?
No, it's on the reciprocal.
Well, there you go. That was a press conference organised there in response to the news that I just brought to you a few minutes ago. Things really are escalating. Of course, that was the press secretary to the White House there, and also the press secretary to the Treasury. I mean, these guys are not messing around. He then, Scott, denying that it's essentially a trade war. I mean, I don't know what you think at home, but it certainly has the feels of one, does it not? Catherine there saying, have people just not essentially been following the art of the deal? This is all about trying to get a deal and get better outcomes. I told you, though, that China are also having absolutely none of this. Their fighting talk is equally as strong. The markets, I've got to say, the US markets, they seem to actually be reacting pretty well to Donald Trump's statement because, of course, I've just told you, he's increasing tariffs onto China of 125%. He's pausing a 90-day pause on the other countries' tariffs and bringing the retaliatory level there to 10%. There'll be many people at home, Aaron Bastani, that think, why do I need to worry about this? How dangerous, how big a deal is this in your mind, do you think?
Why do they need to worry? Well, they don't necessarily need to worry. I mean, don't lose sleep over it. But this could have real concrete implications for all of us, in so much as if you have a global economic downturn, a recession, people lose jobs, and then, of course, you might have some kind of stimulus. You might cut interest rates. People think, well, that's good for my mortgage, perhaps. Or if you've got savings, you think that's bad for my savings. I don't think we'll get higher inflation, which is obviously a good thing because, of course, the US with tariffs is importing inflation. It's going to make goods and services more expensive in the US. We will get some deflation because we'll have a higher supply of Chinese and European goods than we otherwise would have had, Japanese, Korean, here in Europe. So in the short term, we won't get inflation in this side of the Atlantic. But you should care because a trade war, and it is a trade war, between the world's two largest economies, the end of globalization as we know it, could have very meaningful implications for all of us, from your ability to remortgage your house or pay for that extension, to your kids being able to get onto the housing market, and so on. Very quickly, and I'll finish with this, no serious business person thinks you can work like this. If you're an American business with a factory in Vietnam, and last night you think the tariff you've got to pay to access the US market is 45% or whatever it was, and now it's 10%, you can't make investment decisions like that.
I know, but if Donald Trump was sat here now, he'd be saying, guys, I want to shake you all. What I'm trying to do is reset the global economic order. I'm fighting for my people. They've had the mickey taken out of them for far too long. He wants to stop this over-dependence on the likes of China. He wants to fight for his people, bring the jobs back, fire up the factories.
Tariffs will hit his people because they will make everything they buy more expensive, and also the raw materials used in the factories in which some.
Yeah, but he will say that's a temporary blip.
Well, how temporary is temporary? I don't know. Does he know? It's already well talking about the art of the deal, but surely that's about trying to beat down the price of a skyscraper in Manhattan. A very different technique from the one that you use in global economic negotiations. What if this continues? Then it basically means that trades will cease between the world's two largest economies. With all the implications that will have in economic slowdown. And Aaron says don't lose sleep, and of course there isn't any point in losing sleep about it because you can't do anything about it, but it just doesn't look rational to me.
Well, it's not rational, and what I will do is I will oversimplify this massively, because what's going on now, in my humble opinion now, you've now got the fight of two male egos, because one of these two leaders is going to have to be the first one to bow. Which one, if anyone, will it be?
But China does have an immense national and cultural pride, and points out, the Chinese leadership will point out to people who do denigrate China and say that it went through a period of weakness in particularly the 19th century, that for most of the past couple of millennia, China has been the dominant country in the world. And it's rather exceptional when it's not. And if you look at the history of the world's economies and everything else, you will find that there's a lot of truth in what they say. So I wouldn't necessarily underestimate China's staying power in this, but China hasn't chosen this fight.
Yeah, but Trump would say they did by mistreating them in the first place. He would argue.
They're making, and therefore they're free to respond in any way they wish, really, to what is actually an act of economic aggression. But by not choosing the fight, they're already in quite a strong position, it seems to me, before the rest of the world. I don't know. As I say, it doesn't seem to me to be that reason is at work here, and that always frightens when you see unreasoning things going on close to you.
I think I worry about where this will end. And again, I know people will think, oh, look at Michelle oversimplifying it. You've got two very, very powerful men that want to remain powerful men. And they are sitting there, both of them, neither of them, wanting to lose face, neither of them wanting to be the first person to back down. We're seeing this now move at a remarkable, remarkable pace. We're seeing all manner of words and language and you name it, thrown from one side of the fence to the other. I worry in all of this, just for your normal, average Joe, whichever country you live in, you just want a quiet life. You just want to get up, you just want to graft, you want to put the food on the table, you want to be able to afford a table and a roof over your head, you want a nice, quiet life. Unfortunately, it does feel that many people have completely different ideas. Who knows what the situation will be this time tomorrow? I've got no idea, but one thing I do know is that I reckon it will have changed quite a lot between now and then. Look, they've rudely interrupted our time together, gents, so we shall have to reconvene this panel another day, because I know you guys are very popular with the audience. But what I've got to tell you as well, many viewers have got in touch tonight. This whole situation about British Steel that we started the conversation with, there's such a lot of support out there from you guys at home to nationalise steel again. Lots of you getting in touch as well, that you are in Scunthorpe, that you echoed that point that we had from the viewer at the start, that he didn't want it. They don't believe that it should have been sold off to the Chinese in the first place. I'd love to know what you think to all of this Chinese trade war now then. Lots of you also getting in touch about council houses, family, basically saying, Michelle, this is all very simple. Yes, you should have allowed people to buy their own homes, but the flaw in all of this was not allowing people to actually rebuild those properties. Jimmy says it's really simple. It all stems from that. Why can't people basically see that? Jack, though, says, Michelle, you can build all the houses that you like, but if the population keeps growing the way that it does, what are you going to do with all these people? Gents, we will reconvene, worry not. Thank you, though, for tonight. Thank you for your company at home. Have a great evening. Do not go anywhere, though, because up next is GBN Tonight. Night.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tomorrow, we're still going to see plenty of cloud across southeastern areas, but many eastern coasts actually seeing a much brighter day and much warmer too, and plenty of warm sunshine to go around, all thanks to this area of high pressure. And as it slowly sinks its way southwards, we're seeing a change in our wind direction. So that means a bit of a brighter day across northeastern parts. But as we head into this evening, there's still going to be plenty of that cloud drifting in from the North Sea, eventually spreading its way inland towards central and southern parts. But a much clearer night on offer across Scotland, Northern Ireland too, but still plenty of cloud drifting into Shetland and Orkney. And it's going to be quite a cold night on offer, and under the clearest skies, likely seeing some rural frost in places. Now, to start the day across Scotland, it's going to be much brighter, particularly across eastern areas. Aberdeenshire, for example, seeing a much brighter start to the day, but still plenty of cloud lingering on across the Northern Isles. Northern Ireland too are also seeing quite a bright start, still cold, likely seeing some frost. And still across the northeast, there's going to be plenty of cloud. Central and southern areas, southeast too, seeing quite a grey start to the day. But Wales and parts of Cornwall, once again, seeing a brighter start to the day. And any cloud, it may linger for a time through the morning, but it's eventually burning its way back towards coastal areas. And once again, it could linger for a time, particularly across coasts of East Anglia, Sussex and Kent. But across northeastern parts of England, parts of Scotland, particularly in the north,